The spending battle on Capitol Hill continues. Here now is Ron Paul, former Texas congressman and presidential candidate. We have a lot of things to talk to you about today. I want to start with the battle that's going on because that is the news that is still unfolding at this hour. What do you think about the fight as it stands? Should the president hang tough where he is? What's your take on all of it?
Well, I never was very good in politics, and this is all about politics. It has nothing to do, from my viewpoint, for national security. It's just a game, Pelosi against Trump. The people who hate Trump, they're going to try to embarrass him. And I never had the confidence in a fence doing a whole lot of good. I see it as spending more money that we don't have. But as far as politics goes, I don't think anybody knows because it's changing all the time. But my guess would be that there will not be a close down. For some reason, it'll stay open. But, boy, it's coming precariously close. With the holidays, that's, a difference with these other closures. But when you really think about it, we're talking about a small amount of the budget.
Right.
And to put this much emphasis on it, it's pure politics. It doesn't have anything to do, I think, with national security.
It really does make you disgusted with the whole lot of them. In another huge market day, we're looking at the Dow right now, down 464 points on the day. There has been so much up and down, and a lot of it related to the Fed. Yesterday, we heard from a Fed chief who sounded woefully out of touch with what's going on out there in the economy. You have always been a critic of the Fed and having a human being in there, with their hands, on the scale. What's your reaction to what's going on right now?
Well, I'm glad people are looking at the Fed, and I'm glad they're criticizing the Fed and thinking that maybe they're doing some mischief. But quite frankly, it's been the Fed for many, many years, especially the last 10 years of the QEs, and this assumption by about everybody in Washington that the Federal Reserve knows what a proper rate of interest should be. But to me, the astounding thing is when you look at this multi-trillion-dollar economy, a fantastic economic system we have, and they change the rate of interest by 1% and this happens. That can't be it. It's a big reflection because of the politics involved, and that if you had a free market and it moved, that wouldn't affect anything. But it's because the market is so fragile and people anticipate this, they put so much emphasis on it that it will shake the market. But it's not because of 1/4%. It's because of the mischief, the malinvestment, the debt, and all the obligations. And once you build all that interference in the market, it has to correct itself. It has to adjust. And, of course, that's impossible because there's a political cost to that, so nobody does it. Nobody talks about it. But the markets are more powerful than the Fed. I criticize the Fed, but markets are even more powerful.
Okay. President Trump, of course, announcing that he's going to take troops out of Syria. You have been calling for this for a long time. We're also seeing a report that he's considering taking down the number of troops in Afghanistan as well. What is your take on these various moves?
I applaud him. And sometimes we complain about Trump and others when they say things and they don't follow through. On this one, he's following through what he said. He's been critical of those wars, especially in Syria and Afghanistan. And just logic tells us, what are we there for? Are they declared war? Is there any moral purpose for us to be there? Why are we there, and when should we leave? How much is it costing us? So, no, there's no argument for it. And the most important is it's not morally justified, not constitutionally justified. 17 years now, that's long enough to learn a lesson. When are we going to learn our lesson? So I think it's just great. What I love about it is, as a libertarian, I've tried to build coalitions between honest progressives, which there aren't very many left, because they used to be the ones that would object to this, to the wars like this. And there's been some hint of this, that some of the progressives are saying, what are we doing this for? Same thing. If you take
people on the other side, hang on one second, because people on the other side argue that this is what happened in Iraq, that we left a vacuum where, bad actors came in, the development of ISIS, that now if you leave Syria, there's a vacuum of just bad actors laying around, and that the one who benefits the most is Vladimir Putin.
Well, I think it's exactly the opposite, because al-Qaeda was not in Iraq until we went in there. And then we said Iraq was responsible for 9/11. We got into that, and it stirred up war fever there. At the same time we were going after Iraq, you know, there were 19 from Saudi Arabia, and we didn't even talk about them. So I would say that people have to understand one principle, which they're totally ignoring, because they say we should stay there to combat terrorism, the violent people. But why do people get violent? Where did al-Qaeda and these groups come from? It comes from us being there. So if you stay there, let's say it is true they've reduced the number of al-Qaeda and are in better shape, that if by us going back in and accelerating it, it's just the incentive to get more. Because I think Iraq, they use that and they get away with that. But that is not a good analysis, because there was no al-Qaeda. Yeah, they had a ruthless dictator there and ruled with an iron fist, but it wasn't al-Qaeda. Okay. Matter of fact, he kept a balance. And so I think there's a lot of misinformation on that.
Ron Paul, thank you for coming on. We appreciate your time.